Hey guys, welcome back to Ripestories. In this video, a bunch of HOA officers trespassed on my property and told me that I must now pay rent for living in the house that I own. I am not even part of this HOA, but that did not stop them from harassing me and I honestly don't know what to do. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one starts like this. So quite a few years back, I finally got around to achieving one of my lifelong goals. I finally managed to get my career to a point where I was satisfied, so the next step was to go from renting a home to buying and owning outright. I don't think it is too much of an overstatement to say that the day I finally signed that lease was one of the happiest and most satisfying days of my life. Unfortunately, I was also about to learn one of the hardest lessons of my life, though I did not know it at the time. You see, I had not done all that much research before I moved in. Sure, I spent a lot of time looking the houses over, made sure that it passed inspections, and I meticulously compared prices to make sure I was not getting ripped off, but back then I did not realize just how much the neighborhood mattered as well. I figured that as long as it was relatively close to my work, then I could just drive wherever I needed and the neighbors would not matter all that much. Well, I was wrong. Dead wrong. That's right, I had barely managed to get everything unpacked from the moving boxes before I received a rather interesting visit from a neighbor several streets over. I had already said hello to my immediate neighbor, so I was a little thrown off by this visit from someone who I would definitely classify as a stranger. Part of that was certainly because they seemed to be dressed up for the occasion, not in business attire, but rather like they were heading to a costume party. It was some sort of uniform that I'd never seen before, and if I had to guess, I would say it was closest to some sort of first responder or security guard, but a knockoff version that you would buy cheap off the internet. You may be able to guess where this is going. Well, when this neighbor introduced themselves, they said that they were part of the neighborhood HOA. Ah, I thought to myself, so this is just a comedy bit. They were dressed up like this to lean into the whole HOA stereotype and poke fun at themselves. They did not actually see themselves as a professional task force running the neighborhood, right? Well, unfortunately, that was definitely the tone that I went with. I chuckled a bit, especially when they gave me a thick stack of papers to read through so I could familiarize myself with the extensive bylaws. Yeah, there's no way I was gonna subject myself to all of that. They bristled more and more until I realized that this was not at all a bit that was being dragged out way too long. They were actually serious and they wanted me to join the HOA. And by the way, Ripestars, reading this, I just noticed, isn't there a lack of comedians that cover HOAs, or am I just misinformed? I feel like there could be so many funny comedy skits around HOAs, but maybe I just have not found them yet. Anyway, doubly unfortunately, I did not actually check if HOA membership was mandatory before closing the deal on the house. I had absolutely no idea if this fellow had any right to be intruding on my house like this, so I could only nod when he finally took his leave as terse and cold as could be. Of course, once he was gone, I quickly managed to convince myself that it was absolutely outrageous. There was not a snowball's chance in hell that anyone could force me to join a silly organization like that, especially not after I skimmed a few pages of the documentation and saw that there were all sorts of mandatory fees associated with joining. So why on earth would anyone want to willingly sign up for an organization like that? But perhaps the most basic and least valid reason was that I simply had no interest whatsoever in dressing up in a silly little outfit like that just to brag that I was part of the super special neighborhood HOA watch. My pride would not allow it. Honestly, I maybe could have looked past all the other nonsense to pay my dues if I had not been for that whole getup, but maybe that was the final nail in the coffin. Anyway, I decided to just ignore my neighbor and figured what was the worst that could happen? Well, as it turns out, the worst involved a pretty serious campaign of harassment that made my life a living hell for a good 6 months. It started innocently enough with a few reminders in my mail tucked under my welcome mat. You know, the sort of spam that you just see and reflexively throw away without really thinking about it all. This just reinforced my first impression that these guys were not really worth taking seriously. Unfortunately, that was just the beginning and I think I really pissed them off by being so flippant about it. About 2 weeks after that first visit and a few dozen reminders tossed in the trash, I got another visit from the so-called HOA officers. This time there were 2 of them, and judging by the differences between their uniforms, I think they brought a higher up to make sure I understood the severity of the situation. Yeah, that worked out great considering I all but laughed in their faces. They were so indignant they were turning red as they gave me a whole prepared speech about how much of an honor it was to be part of the HOA and blah blah blah. Looking back, maybe I should have paid a little more attention to the blah 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 part and maybe even recorded it, because I think they made some pretty serious threats about what might happen to my home if I did not sign on the dotted line and pay my dues. Then again, maybe there was no warning whatsoever, and the next few weeks of harassment and torment really did come out of nowhere, and that is exactly what happened. Harassment and torment. Starting with petty vandalism that seemed meant more to scare me than cause damage, they soon escalated to banging on my door at all hours when they wanted to drop off yet another reminder to pay my dues. Now, I'm not proud of it, but at this point I was being downright stubborn. I was refusing to read any of their literature, purely out of spite. I knew roughly what it said, but I didn't want to give them a single minute of my time. However, I did eventually get so fed up that I wanted to get a little revenge, so I started scanning all the crap they had given me lately to see if there was a number I could call so I could give them a piece of my mind. Except on this latest round of papers, it seems, they were not content just demanding that I join the HOA, instead they were claiming that my failure to join now meant that I owed them money in fines and fees. More alarmingly, these numbers seem to be going up with every threatening letter at an astronomical rate, as though they were trying to punish me for every ignored message. The wildest part is that they were calling these fees rent. Somehow, in this twisted scheme of theirs, they asserted that I did not actually own the house I'm living in as long as I was not part of the HOA, so I somehow owed them money for the privilege of living among their miserable selves, and that was on top of various other accusations that I owed money for an endless list of violations. That kicked my butt into high gear like nothing else. I needed to find out yesterday if there was any truth to this nonsense, and my blood was boiling just thinking about the possibility they might have a leg to stand on. It seemed inconceivable, but they were so damn sure of themselves that I could not help but wonder. I started scouring the web, finding out everything I could about HOAs and exactly what sort of powers they had. I wanted to get all my ducks in a row before actually talking to a lawyer directly and potentially embarrassing myself if I was really in the wrong here. And that's exactly what I was doing, busying myself with research, when I got a knock on the door. When I answered it, I found myself face to face, not with the HOA Gestapo, but rather with a very serious woman that claimed to be a home inspector. I say claimed like I was suspicious, but at the time I believed her when she said that it was a follow-up visit after my pre-purchase inspections to make sure that everything was in order. She came through, made a series of notes, and then mentioned a couple potential violations in the yard. They were the same things the HOA had been complaining about, so I kind of wondered if maybe there was some basis for their whining after all. Of course, that only lasted until that evening when I was looking up the HOA website to continue my research. That is when I found the profile of this home inspector listed right there along with all the other big shots in the HOA. Funnily enough, her bio mentioned that she was a stay-at-home mother and did not say anything about experience with home inspections. That was the last straw, and I vowed to get in touch with a lawyer the very next day. Even if I was wrong about half this insanity, there still had to be something fishy going on here. The next morning as I was getting my coffee, I even spotted a few HOA members walking by my windows a little too closely for them to be on the sidewalk. I think they started peeping into my house just to see if they could catch me doing anything untowards. Fortunately, when I did visit a lawyer that afternoon, I was relieved to discover that I was not making a mountain out of a molehill, not even by a long shot. The lawyer was actually in disbelief and thought I was pulling their leg about the uniforms, but I pulled up the website and showed him their very extensive collection of pictures. The HOA was very proud of themselves, so there was plenty of proof to show. We decided that the best path forward was to immediately get started on a cease and desist and then to do a deeper investigation into the bylaws and see just how deep the rot went. The damages could be astronomical, according to my lawyer, especially if there were other neighbors that would be willing to join the case as well. I had another idea though, a way to fight back for myself. I was not too sure if the lawyer was going to be on board with it or if he thought it would ruin my chances with the lawsuit, but when I ran it by him, he loved it. So as long as I didn't get aggressive and just recorded what the HOA was doing on my property, he said it should be perfectly fine. So that is what I did. I went home, stayed quiet about the visit to the lawyer, and made sure to record every encounter with the HOA from then on out. I took great care not to record them while they were out on the street, not even if they were yelling at me about how I was gonna regret not paying my dues, but trust me, the content they provided on my doorstep alone was enough to make all my dreams come true. It started with a little website that I built from a template with constant posts and captions. I did not sensationalize things because the audio really did speak for itself. By design, I did not publicize it too much until I got a decent number of videos uploaded, and then I started to post links on social media. My god, did all hell break loose. I thought it was gonna antagonize the HOA and maybe get a little bit of quietly sympathetic support from other neighbors that were silently suffering under their boot. But seriously, it spread like absolute wildfire. At first it was just in the city, but there were soon people commenting from the other side of the country, and absolutely everyone was laughing at these goofballs. It took me days to ruin the years of time, money and effort that went into building their exclusive little club. They collapsed almost overnight. I think the HOA folded the moment they received the notice from my lawyer, but he had anticipated that and went after individual members to make sure I got what I was owed. I never paid a single dime of the fictitious fees and dues they demanded, but I was not able to get much in damages either. That being said, I consider it a resounding success purely because the HOA got humiliated and disbanded. I don't think the members are ever gonna live it down, not now that the internet has been made aware of their ridiculous website with all their bios. And yeah guys, if you enjoy the HOA stories, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel because that helps me tremendously. Thank you so much for your amazing support and for supporting real voice human creators. The next one is an amazing HOA revenge story that you don't want to miss. It is titled, I Got Revenge on My Awful HOA with Spray Paint. I have been dealing with what might be the most uptight HOA in existence for the last 5 years. My wife and I bought our house in this neighborhood because the schools are good and the crime rate is basically non-existent, but sometimes I wonder if the trade-offs is worth it. Let me give you some context about how ridiculous our HOA is. So first, you cannot park any truck in your driveway, not even a small Ford Ranger. Trucks have to go into the garage or not on your property at all. Second, your grass has to be maintained between 2.5 and 3.5 inches tall. And yes, they actually measure it. Third, any exterior modification, no matter how small, requires approval from the architectural committee, which meets once a month and has been known to deny people permission to change their doorbell. When we moved in, we received a 47-page handbook of rules. My wife read it cover to cover, but I will admit I just skimmed the highlights. Big mistake. Well, this summer I decided to build a deck in our backyard. I've always wanted one, and our backyard is perfect for it. Flat, south-facing, and with a nice view of the sunset. I got the plans drawn up, submitted them to the architectural committee, and after 2 rejections and modifications, finally got approval in June. I marked out the space where the deck would go, about 16 by 20 feet, and since I knew that I would be digging up all that grass anyway, I stopped watering that section altogether. No point in wasting water on grass that was gonna be removed, right? Well, especially in the middle of a hot, dry summer, with water restrictions in place, it made sense to me. The rest of the yard I maintained meticulously. I watered, I fertilized, I mowed exactly to 3 inches. The front yard looked like a golf course. But that back section, the one that would soon be covered by a deck, I just let it die. It turned brown within 2 weeks. I was in the middle of digging post holes when I heard someone call out from beyond our fence. "Excuse me, property inspection." I looked up to see a woman in a polo shirt with the HOA logo peering over our 6-foot privacy fence. She was standing on something to see over it. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my tone civil. "We've had reports of dead vegetation in this yard," she said, clipboard in hand. "I need to document it." "You're standing on something to look over my fence into my private backyard?" I asked. "HOA bylaws give us the right to inspect properties from any vantage point to ensure compliance," she recited like she had memorized it. "I'm building a deck here," I explained, gesturing to the obvious markers, the post hole digger, and the lumber stacked nearby. "This grass is going to be removed anyway. The deck was approved last month." "Regardless of future plans, all visible grass must be maintained in a healthy green condition at all times. Section 7, paragraph 4 of the bylaws." She snapped some photos with her phone, made some notes, and then left. 3 days later, I received a certified letter with a $250 fine for failure to maintain lawn in accordance with community standards, and a demand to restore the affected area to healthy condition within 7 days or face additional penalties of $50 per day. I was furious. I took the letter to my wife, who read it and sighed. "It is in the rules," she said. Page 23. Even areas scheduled for renovation must be maintained until the work begins. Work has begun, I pointed out. I've got post holes dug. They consider work begun when the structure is being actively built, she explained. Preparation apparently does not count. I called the HOA office and tried to reason with them. The conversation went nowhere. I even offered to put down tarps to cover the dead grass, but they said that would violate the rule against unsightly construction materials being visible from any angle. Well, that night I could not sleep. I kept thinking about how ridiculous this all was. Why should I have to reseed or sod an area that was going to be completely covered in a matter of weeks anyway? The water waste alone bothered me, not to mention the cost and effort, but then it hit me. The rule said the grass had to be healthy and green. And well, it did not specify how it achieved that state. Next morning I went to the hardware store and bought 4 cans of lawn spray paint. Yes, lawn paint. It's actually a thing. Landscapers use it on golf course and for movie sets. It is non-toxic and designed specifically for this purpose, so I came home, changed into old clothes and started spraying the dead patch. An hour later I had a perfectly green lawn in the exact spot where my deck would eventually go. From a distance you could not even tell it was dead. Up close it was obvious, but you would have to be in my yard to see it. I took several photos from different angles, making sure to document how green it looked, and emailed them to the HOA office with a note saying that I had restored the lawn to a green condition as requested. 2 days later, the same inspector was back, this time with the HOA President in tow. Again, they were peeking over my fence. "Sir, did you paint your grass?" the President called out. I walked calmly to the fence. I restored it to a green condition as required by the bylaws. "This is not what the rule intends," he sputtered. "The rule requires grass to be green." "My grass is now green," I replied. "Unless you can show me where the bylaws prohibit the use of lawn colorant, I believe I'm in compliance." "This is clearly an attempt to circumvent the rules," the inspector said. "No, this is very clearly an attempt to comply with a ridiculous demand to water and maintain grass that's gonna be removed anyway," I countered. "I'm preventing water waste during a drought while still keeping the aesthetic you require." If you would like, I can connect you with the Parks Department. They used the same product on municipal grounds. They left in a huff and I received another letter the next day. This time they claimed that I was in violation of the spirit of the regulations and threatened to put a lien on my house if I did not properly restore the lawn. I consulted a lawyer friend who looked over the HOA bylaws, and he laughed when he got to the relevant section. "They've got nothing," he told me. "The bylaw specifically says maintain a green appearance and doesn't specify the method. Even their definition of healthy refers to visual appearance and not biological status. Send them this letter." He drafted a response pointing out that nowhere in the bylaws was there a prohibition against lawn paint, and that the community standards only specified appearance rather than methods, and that attempting to enforce unwritten spirit rules was contrary to contract law. He also mentioned that entering or attempting to view my fenced backyard without permission could constitute trespassing. I sent the letter via certified mail. 2 days later, I received a terse email stating that upon review, my fine had been temporarily suspended, pending further investigation and discussion at the next board meeting. The day before the meeting, I finished the last of the post holes and started setting the supports for my deck. I made sure to do it when I knew the HOA President walked his dog, so he could see the actual construction had begun. At the board meeting, which I attended with my lawyer friend, the issue of my painted lawn came up. Several board members seemed ready to create a new bylaw specifically prohibiting lawn paint, but my lawyer pointed out that they could not retroactively punish me for something that was not against the rules at the time. In the end, they dropped the fine entirely but passed a new rule the following month, specifically prohibiting artificial coloration of vegetation. I consider it a personal victory that they had to change their precious rulebook because of me. My deck is now complete and it is beautiful. Every time I sit on it with a cold beer, I think about the green painted dirt underneath it and I smile. So Reddit, am I the jerk for spray painting my dead grass green to spite my HOA? And yeah guys, let me know what you think about this one in the comments. Do you think OP was the a-hole for doing this or not? I would say he was a genius for this. That's exactly how you maliciously comply with the HOA orders and get petty revenge in return. Absolutely beautiful course of actions. So the first comment on Reddit said, "This is why I refuse to live anywhere with an HOA. They are like little dictatorships run by people with nothing better to do than measure grass and peek over fences." Comment number 2, everyone sucks here. Your HOA is obviously on a power trip with their fence peeking and nitpicky rules, but come on, you knew what you were signing up for when you bought in an HOA neighborhood. The mature thing would have been to either put down sod temporarily or accelerate your deck building schedule, instead of turning this into a petty paint war. Also, now they've added another stupid rule to their 47-page handbook that future homeowners will have to deal with. Sometimes it is better to just play the game. Comment number 3, you are the a-hole. Look, I hate HOAs too, but it is always the but, guys. It just always is. But you basically handed them a reason to make life worse for everyone. Congrats, your petty stunt means now nobody can use lawn paint to deal with drought spots or construction zones. Plus, you wasted time and money on spray paint just to flex instead of just laying sod for a week. Pick your battles, my guy. This was not standing up for your rights, it was just main character syndrome drama. And before we end the video, we will read one last satisfying petty revenge story. It is titled, "The Time a Supervisor Tried to Throw Me Under the Bus, But I Had Receipts." So this happened in 2015, during my first year of teaching in special education in the US. I don't know if anyone else here works in SPED, but if you do, you're probably familiar with the difficult process of obtaining a one-on-one para for a student. So I had this kiddo, we will call him Jay. Jay had some unsafe behaviors as a kindergartner, such as eloping from the school and into the neighborhood. It was terrifying to say the least and a big safety concern, so I spoke with my supervisor, showed him the data, and he agreed this student definitely needed one-on-one support. My supervisor, Mr. C, worked with me for a couple of weeks on the safety net process. Getting a one-on-one, it was a lot of loops and jumps and saying the right thing in very specific ways, but I got it completed. I sent it to Mr. C for the last final review and was met with silence. I emailed him after a day because, well, we are all busy in this field, no worries, but more silence. I called his office and left a voicemail with his secretary, but even more silence. I tried to get a hold of him for 2 weeks with growing worry because the deadline was approaching, but I never heard back from him. After the due date passed, he finally messaged me and said since I did not reach out to him with the final copy, the one-on-one was not approved. Needless to say, I was pissed. So I gathered copies of all the emails, the phone calls, every attempt I made to reach out to him and send it to his boss, Mr. B, head of SPED services. I also included Mr. C's last email. A couple days later, Mr. C sent me a formal letter of apology through our district mailing system. Mr. B granted me an extension and filed the paperwork himself, and also granted me an emergency one-on-one while the paperwork processed. At the end of the year, Mr. C was fired from his position. I doubt it was just me, but I'm sure my receipts had something to do with his removal as a SPED supervisor. Well, that's my story. I was telling it to a coworker here and he said I should post it under petty revenge. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. Please check out my playlist on the left side of the screen and I will see you tomorrow.